Good morning or good early noon, everybody. Good morning, everybody. I would like to start the class now. I'll just request anyone who is able to open the camera. I think it will give us a better feeling instead of talking to almost, I don't know, 20 boxes, 20 black boxes or with nice pictures. So those who are able to open their cameras, I'll appreciate it. Those who don't, then beseder. But I think a better percentage of cameras that are open will facilitate the learning. Okay. So the topic that I chose to speak about today is the topic of war on Shabbat. I don't know if there's going to be a war on Shabbat. I think none of us know. There are all kinds of informations back and forth coming up regarding, will there be a ceasefire or not? Not clear yet. Well, last Shabbat there was a war. So the topic of war on Shabbat is a known topic that was discussed by rabbis, by my late Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Amital, by Rav Goren, by Rabbi Osher Weiss. Now, when we came back to our land and we have a Jewish state, and unfortunately we have wars, then the topic of war on Shabbat is discussed. So first of all, one can say, I don't know what is the basis for a special discussion about war on Shabbat. It's just a sub-discussion under the category of pikuach nefesh, okay? Meaning, there is a topic, we know that pikuach nefesh is doche Shabbos. Well, milchama, a case of a war, is pikuach nefesh. So it's not a separate halachic discussion, war on Shabbat. It's just to apply the general rules of pikuach nefesh. This is a claim one could have made. So let's start really with the sources for pikuach nefesh overriding Shabbat. The fact that one is allowed to be mechal Shabbat for pikuach nefesh. Now, the fact that one is allowed to be mechal Shabbat for pikuach nefesh is has nothing to do with war. This is an halacha that was said also about individuals. Yeah, here I see my dear friend Michael Silman. Okay, excuse me for and he is a long time with great reputation family doctor. And I know, and I'm sure that he had several Shabbatot in his life, that he was sitting at his home, and then there was a knock on the door, and there was some emergency or whatever, and he had to violate Shabbos on this level or another in order to save the life of that person that was in need. Okay? So that has nothing to do with war. There is a rule that pikuach nefesh is doche Shabbat, okay? Which is a law that is referring to individuals. Now, first of all, let's establish this halacha. So let's see. I'll share with you the screen now. Here, there we go. So I hope all of you have I'm muted. Yes. So I'll try again to share the screen with everybody. For some reason, it didn't work before. Yeah. Do you all have the screen? Chaverim, do you all have?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so if you all have the screen, that's very, very good. So let's
Can you
start.
enlarge it?
What?
Can you enlarge this, the
print.
the print?
Okay, this could work. Um,
That's better.
okay, now you hear me again, right? Okay, so let's go. The Gemara in Masechet Yoma says the following: Minayin lefikuach nefesh shedoche et haShabbos. Okay, what is the source? Says the Gemara in Yoma that pikuach nefesh is pushing away Shabbos, meaning that you can violate Shabbos in order to save life. Now Rabbi Yishmael ve'Amar. Okay, so Rabbi Yishmael gave a certain source that for the time concerns, I won't share with you, but I'll just say orally that there are several sources. Some learn it from the fact that a Kohen can be removed from working on the altar if he's able to save someone. And since the avoda is docha Shabbos, and we see that life is docha the avoda, so we know, if A is bigger than B and B is bigger than C, then A is bigger than C. Meaning, if avoda overrides Shabbos, but pikuach nefesh overrides avoda, so you infer that pikuach nefesh overrides Shabbos. Okay, so that's one source. There's several other sources, like one is learning from Mila. If Mila is doche Shabbos, and we learn it from the Gzeres HaKatuv Vayom Hashmini Yimol B'Sar Olato, that Mila is doche Shabbos, and Mila is referring only to one organ, whereas Pikuach Nefesh is referring to all the life. So one of the sages inferred from here that Pikuach Nefesh is doche Shabbos, and there are more sources. Then we have Rabbi Yonatan ben Yosef Omer. After several sources are brought down, Rabbi Yonatan ben Yosef Omer, Ki Kodesh Ilachem. Regarding Shabbos, it's written, since it's Kodesh for you. And then there is an inference. Hi miswa beidechem, velo atem misuim beyada. It's for you. It's holy for you. So it's in your hands, and not that you're in the hands of the Shabbos, meaning that your lives will be at the hands of the Shabbos. Therefore, there is a learning that Pikuach Nefesh is pushing away Shabbos. Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya Omer, V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbos. That's a very famous source. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbos. Amra Torah, the Torah said, Chalel alav Shabbat achat kedei shishmor Shabbatot harbe. Violate one Shabbos for him so that he will keep many Shabbosos. Meaning this is like a utilitarian calculation, efficiency. It's better. It says that Bnei Israel should guard and keep the Shabbat. What does that mean? That sometimes I'll violate Shabbos for the interest of Shabbos, meaning this man that I'll save, now he will keep many, many more Shabbosim. And if I won't save him, then he won't keep many, many Shabbosim. So violate one Shabbos for him so that he will keep many Shabbosim. That is a famous source. And then the last source that is Dafka brought by an Amora. All the previous sources were brought by Tanoim. And here an Amora is saying in the name of Shmuel, the first generation Amora, if I was there in that gathering of the Tanoim, I would have told them, my source is better than you guys' sources. Didi adifa minayu mididhu. It says, V'chai bahem v'lo sheyamut bahem. There's a general verse, not particularly regarding Shabbos. There's a general verse in the Torah regarding all the mitzvos that is saying, Ele mitzvot asher yaseh otam ha'adam v'chai bahem. These are the mitzvos that one should do, and he should live by them. and the sages infer, v'chai bahem v'lo she'amut bahem. He should live by them and not should die through them. So that's a special gzeras hakatuv of v'chai bahem, that mitzvos should not be associated with something that will cause you to die, but rather, or will endanger your life, rather that mitzvot should be associated with living. And therefore, you will eat non-kosher if you're in a life danger and there's no other option. You will violate Shabbos if there's no other option to live. That's a general source of the Chaybem, and Shmuel claims, my source is better than all the previous sources. Rava in the Gemara that I didn't quote explains why Shmuel thinks it's the best source. And it's the best source because that includes, that's how they infer, not only pikuach nefesh, but also safek pikuach nefesh. Meaning if there is a chance that the life in danger, there's no certainty. Perhaps the life is not in danger, but we are under uncertainty. There's a doubt. Even that doubt enables us, perhaps even obligates us to violate Shabbos, just not to take a chance that there is a life danger here. Okay? And this is inferred from the verse Vachai Bahim, that he should live anyhow, in any way. Now this is ruled halacha l'maisa, what I told you that safek pikuach nefesh is doche Shabbos. It's an explicit Gemara that says that if one walks in the street and he sees a pile of stones after, unfortunately, this halacha is not theoretical, after what happened in Karlin last Sunday night. Let's say you see that a wall fell down, and now you're in doubt whether there are people under it that are buried, okay? So first of all, you're not sure. Maybe you will unpile and you'll see that no one is there. Or maybe you will unpile and see that the people there are already dead. But there is a chance that there's someone alive under this pile of stones. And and you can rescue him now. So now I'm under uncertainty. Yeah, I just see a pile of stones of a wall that just collapsed. And I really don't know whether by me violating Shabbos, will I save lives or maybe I won't. The Gemara says, based on the source, Vachai Bahem, yeah, and you should live by them, one is expected to violate Shabbos even when there is only a chance that he will save lives. So as I told you, actually Maimonides, the Rambam, Maimonides gives the ruling. Let me just close here the door because I think it's noisy. So you need to, one needs to understand that the Rambam, Maimonides, is ruling halacha l'maaseh, this source of Vachai Bahem, and is ruling, and the Shulchan Aruch is ruling that he's ruling the halacha, that even on a safek pikuach nefesh, one violates Shabbos. Now, does that mean that the other source that was written before by Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh of violate on him one Shabbos so that other Shabbosim will be kept? Is this source not valid at all? So many of the poskim are ruling both sources, okay? Are ruling both sources because both sources have halachic implication, okay? We have shown, I'll give you an example. There is a discussion if someone is at life danger, okay, all right, someone is now at a risk of life, but I know that even if I'll violate Shabbos, the only thing on now it's 3 p.m. on Shabbos. I know that if I'll give him treatment that involves Chil Shabbos, the maximum that I'll reach that instead of passing away now, he'll pass in 4 p.m. I extended his life in 1 hour. Now, if the reason is violate one Shabbos on him so that he will be able to keep more Shabbosim in the future, then this source is not valid here because we know for sure that he's going to die during this Shabbos. Or let's say, now I'll say something less politically correct. I'm now saving a life of a Jew that it's, let's say, theoretically clear cut that he will never keep Shabbos. He's an atheist, and of course, you can say you never know when his neshama will, when he will have his neshama will wake up, and maybe in 20 years he will keep Shabbos. But let's say, he lives amongst the Gentiles. I don't know. Probability is that he won't keep a Shabbosos. Now, the ruling is, of course, that all of both of these cases, someone that I'll extend his life only in 1 hour, or someone that is clear cut that he will never keep Shabbos, still the ruling is to violate Shabbos and save him, because the source is v'chai b'hem, and the source of v'chai b'hem, for that source, it's not relevant whether we will keep future Shabbos or not. It would just know that mitzvos should not cause death. Mitzvahs should cause only life. And that is regardless of whether it will keep future Shabbosim or not. So here is an implication why we indeed rule that b'chai b'hem, meaning that we always violate Shabbos, even on a suffix pikuach nefesh. But we do apply also the previous source. And the interesting, the way we apply it is Nachmanides. Nachmanides says that a fetus, an embryo, as an ubar, is not considered yet a full living creature, okay, till birth. And yet still, one will violate Shabbos in order to save an ubar. And why? That is based on the source Chalel alav Shabbat achat, violate on him one Shabbos so that he will keep in the future many Shabbosim. Meaning here, the source of v'chai b'hem is not applicable because he's not really totally, fully considered alive. He's still in the womb. But the source of violate one Shabbos so that he will in the future keep many Shabbos, what I call the utilitarian source, that is applicable regarding a fetus. That's what says Nachmanides. Okay, so that was an intro to our topic, war on Shabbat. Just to give a quick overview of the general rule of Pikuach Nefesh Doche Shabbat. Now, after giving this overview, then our question that I raised in the beginning of the shir is very, very clear. Why should we have a separate shir on war on Shabbat? After all, if I learned that even a suffix pikuach nefesh, even a scenario that is not 100% pikuach nefesh, even if there is a doubt that there is pikuach nefesh here, then one violates Shabbos. Well, every war is at least suffix pikuach nefesh, so I just have the umbrella of pikuach nefesh, and I don't need any separate halachic category of war on Shabbat. Some indeed hold that this is the case, that the basis for violating Shabbos during a war is really the sources that we learned, that suffix pikuach nefesh is indeed pushing away Shabbat. Okay, great. But now let's see if there is another way to approach this and also see whether if I'll go with that approach that I just mentioned, that it's all based on considerations of pikuach nefesh, then perhaps I'm very limited the scope. Could I run a war in a normal way if I have to do the cheshbonis, whether each discrete action is a suffix pikuach nefesh? What I mean is this action a suffix pikuach nefesh or not? Is that a normal way for a nation to run a war? Okay, so let's see here some sources regarding the matter. Okay, so let's look at Sefer Maccabim. Yeah, Sefer Maccabim, that's from the time of the Hashmonaim, and the source reads the following. Vayugad la'anshei hamelech, to Antiochus, it was told to the people of Antiochus and to the force that with them in Jerusalem in Ir David, ki yardu anashim asher avu et mitzvat hamelech, that Jews that violated the commandments of the king, meaning they, i.e., they did Mila and all the things that the king said not to do, kept the Torah. And so the people that violated the commandments of Antiochus, they went down lamachboim bamidbar. They went to hide, to find shelter in the desert. Yeah, they fled from Ir David, the city of David, to the desert. So they chased after them, the Greeks. And they did a war, they waged a war on the Jews that were hiding in the desert, Dafka b'Shabbat. And they told them, they called on them, probably they did some siege over them. They told them, Rav lachem, tz'u v'asu k'dvar hamelech v'chiyu. They said, it's enough, just get out of your shelters, follow the order of the king, and we'll spare your lives. We don't want to kill you, says the Greeks. We just want to that you will violate your Torah commandments, meaning the king commanded to not to do Mila, I don't know what, to maybe to offer a pig, whatever it is. So just do what the king said and be alive. Vayomu, and the Jews answered them, Lo netzeh, we will not go out. V'lo na'aseh dvar hamelech, and we will not do what the king commanded. Lechalel et Yom HaShabbat. We will not violate Shabbos. You want us to violate Shabbos? We're refusing to now violate Shabbos so that the king will be happy. Vayemaru la'asot itam milchama. So the Greeks responded with attacking them, doing a war over them. These Jews hiding in the shelters in the desert, the Greeks started, I don't know, throwing stones at them, doing the war. Velo anu lahem. But there was no response from the Jews, meaning they didn't attack back and they didn't protect themselves. Lo ishlichu aleim even. They didn't throw stones back at them. Now, furthermore, lo satmu et hamachboim. They didn't even block the shelter. Meaning, since blocking the entrances to the shelters would have involved Chilul Shabbos, the Jews refrained from doing that. Be'omram, and they were saying, the Jews, Namut kulanu betumenu. We will die innocent. Edim lanu hashamayim va'aretz ki belo mishpat tisofunu. The heaven and the earth are our witnesses that we will kill not justly. And indeed, the Greeks did a war on them in Shabbos. It's a terrible tragedy. The Jews refused to protect themselves on Shabbat in order not to violate Shabbos. And the result was terrible. Indeed, 1,000 Jews were killed by the Greeks simply because the Jews didn't protect themselves. Why did the Jews didn't protect themselves? Because they were refusing to do any Chilul Shabbos. That seems to us very, very alien, right? I mean, this source, I mean, no rabbi today will tell the Israeli army, the IDF, look, if the Hamas attacks you on Shabbos, we should not respond on Shabbos. Or, let's go to the Yom Kippur War. The Egyptians and the Syrians waged a war on us during Yom Kippur. No rabbi said, hey, hello, we should let them invade the country and say, okay, Motzei Shabbos will start fighting back. Motzei Yom Kippur will start fighting back. No rabbi ruled this way. On the contrary, the story goes that in Yeshivat Har Etzion, in the yeshiva that I grew up in, then in the middle of the Yom Kippur services of the yeshiva, the army came to take the soldiers. The Rashi Yeshiva gave them a sicha, a very moving speech in order to encourage them going to the war. And Rav Lichtenstein ran after the soldiers and gave them cut toilet paper that he himself cut because he felt that's the only thing he can do as a person who made Aliyah and didn't serve in the army and felt terrible that he can't participate, he can't join his students. So he said that's the minimum that I can do. And even though it involved violation of Yom Kippur, and believe me, my Rebbe was very careful with the laws of Yom Kippur. So it's a sine qua non. All of us know that a war is Doche Shabbos. And we see here in this ancient source that the Jews that were hiding in the desert from the Greeks were not holding that way, it seems, on the surface. We'll see that Rav Goren interprets the source a little differently, and I'll share this with you. The simple meaning of the source, I don't know if simple meaning, we'll see. But the fact is that the Greeks waged a war on the Jews, and the Jews refused to attack back, refused to protect themselves in order not to violate Shabbos, and actually paid a very, very precious price. 1,000 Jews were killed. So we'll need to explain this source. Let's continue now. I'm sharing the source back. The news came to the attentions of Matityahu and the people. And they mourned over these 1,000 Jews very much. And they said one to the other, if we'll keep this way, like our brothers did, and we won't fight back the Gentiles for our lives and our Torah, then quickly they will destroy us. And then they consulted and announced, anyone that will come and wage war on us on Shabbat, we will fight him. And we won't die, all of us, as our brothers passed away, were killed in the shelter. What do we see here? It's a very, very important source regarding war and Shabbos, historical one. The simple interpretation of this source is that there was some development here in halacha, meaning the Jews originally thought that one does not do a war on Shabbos, and that it's better to die in an innocent way, as they said, and not violate Shabbos, meaning that you should be moser your nefesh even on Shabbos. That's what seems to be the original halacha here from this source. And then, due to the tragedy that happened, that 1,000 Jews were killed, and the cheshbon that Matityahu and his Beit Din did, that if we'll go in that direction, then all the Gentiles will find a trick They will always attack us on Shabbos, and it's a real sakana to Klal Yisrael. It's not merely a pikuach nefesh, it's a sakana to all Klal Yisrael, because that's a patent that now the Gentiles will apply always. So based on that, Matityahu ruled that yes, a war does push away Shabbos and one should violate. So that is one way of reading the source. Yeah, that it's a certain, that what we know based on the Babylonian Talmud that was written way after this source. Yeah, we're talking now about the Hashmonaim period, which was in the time of the Second Temple. Babylonian Talmud is hundreds of years later. So the fact that the Babylonian Talmud sees it as a very simple thing, that that one should violate, that should go over transgressions, only with the exception of the three Averot, Avodah Zarah, Gilui Arad, and Shvichus Damim. But all the rest, Pikuach Nefesh, B'chai B'hem, is overriding all the rest of the mitzvos. That is already in the Babylonian Talmud. But what we learn, according to some scholars from this source, that there was some development in Malacha, that it wasn't always that way. That at earlier times, people thought that they can't do war on Shabbos and die. And only Matityahu changed that ruling. That is one way of reading the source. Rav Goren offers an alternative way to read this source. An alternative way that will make it compatible with the Babylonian Talmud and with the halacha that we know now. What is Rav Goren's svara here? Rav Goren says, according to the Babylonian Talmud, according to the established halacha, we know that if there is Shat Hashmad, meaning if the Gentiles are into, I'll explain. We know that generally speaking, only for 3 transgressions, one should sacrifice his life and not go over it. Avodah Zarah, Gilui Arayos, and Shvichus Damim. Yeah, murder, adultery, and adultery. However, there's another detail there in the Gemara. The Gemara says that if Gentiles at a certain period of time, they want all the Jews not to observe kashrus, for example. And they're doing it intentionally in order to uproot them from their religion. Meaning it's not an interest, let's say they want the Jews not to eat kosher because they want to make money out of this product. But the purpose is to uproot the Jews, to cause the Jews, the reason why the Gentiles are threatening and telling you, either you violate this mitzvah or I'll shoot you. And they're doing it intentionally only as a war of religion. Then, in such a case, one is required to sacrifice his life, even if it's not the 3 transgressions, even if it's kashrus, even if it's any other mitzvah. If the purpose is a religious purpose, meaning to uproot you from the religion, and that's the only interest of the Gentile, then one should sacrifice his life. I'll further clarify myself. Let's say a Gentile comes to me and puts a gun here and tells me, either you shoot this guy or I'll shoot you. Now he does that not as part of a religious war. It's just that he hates that other guy. And for some reason, he prefers that I'll shoot him and not him. So he puts a gun in my head and tells him, shoot that other guy. But it's not part of a religious campaign, a religious war. Still, I'm not allowed. I'll have to sacrifice my life and not shoot that other guy. However, if a Gentile tells me, eat this non-kosher food, and he does it just because he wants that I'll like that food, because he has a business in it or whatever, then I'll have to eat that food. Only if he puts a gun in my head and tells me, eat that non-kosher food, and he wants it as part of a religious war in order to uproot me from the mitzvah, then I have to sacrifice my life. Now comes Rav Goren and says a very simple explanation here. Rav Goren claims that, and we saw it, that's why I read this source with y'all at length. The context was that the Greeks wanted them to violate Shabbos. That was the case. That's why they ran away, because the Greeks had a religious war and they wanted them to violate Shabbos. So the Jews there thought that even as part of a war, they can't violate Shabbos and they have to be moser their nefesh, because that was a religious war, specifically regarding the mitzvah of Shabbos. So there was a svara here, a local svara, why the Jews there didn't fight back on Shabbos. They thought it's Shat Hashmad. It's a special case where one should sacrifice his life because the Greeks want to make a point specifically regarding Chil Shabbos and to uproot us from the mitzvah. And Matityahu still ruled and said, no, but it's different. If it's time to violate Shabbos, then you're all right. But here, the case was when it's clearly a war in order to protect the Jewish people, then this will always, that's a case of pikuach nefesh. That is a threat. That is a threat. Even if I define this as Shat Hashmad, a Gzera time, that is a threat, as Matityahu explained, to the existence of the entire Jewish people. That will override even a Shat Hashmad. It's not just a simple pikuach nefesh. So that's how Rav Goren explains the source, and actually one can read the source according to Rav Goren. What Rav Goren gains is that there wasn't such a dramatic change in the development of halacha, and that premise that pikuach nefesh and war is overriding Shabbos was already accepted generally back then. Now, let's go further, and I want to get to the root of the topic. So let's see here, Maimonides. Maimonides here is saying the following ruling. Of the Kochavim, Gentiles, who made a siege on the cities of Israel, if they came regarding monetary issues, that was their attack, then one should not violate Shabbos regarding them, and you don't make a war. Meaning, if there's no life threat, they're Gentiles, they're just robbers, people who want to steal money, and they're coming and they come over to the cities of Israel in order to steal money. But we know it's clear, the scenario is clear that they're not going to kill anyone. Then you should not do any war with them. However, if it's a city that is on the border, Smuch al Asfar, even if they are coming only to steal money or property, then you should take your weapons and you should violate Shabbos. And everywhere, if they come regarding, they come to kill people, or they're coming to do a war, then you should actually violate Shabbos. So what is the Rambam saying? And the Rambam, we were just quoting the Gemara in Eruvin. Yeah, the Gemara in Eruvin and the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch are quoting it halacha l'maaseh. And what the Rambam is saying, based on the Gemara and the Shulchan Aruch, is that there are two categories. There's a city that is on the border, and there's a city that is in the middle of the country. The city that is on the border, you should always violate Shabbos, even if people are coming to attack it just for money purposes, and you know that they're not planning to kill anyone, you should violate Shabbos and protect. However, if it's a city in the middle of the country, then there is a distinction. Only if it's a life day, only if they come to kill people, you're allowed to do a war. But if they come only to steal, then you don't make a war. So now we need to understand what is the basis for the ruling of the Gemara that when it's a city in the border, then even if it's clearly they're not coming for life-threatening issues, you violate Shabbos. Okay, so Rashi gives the explanation. Then once they will conquer, even though they didn't kill anyone, once they'll conquer the city and the border, then the problem is that they will come more and more and more, and then they will conquer the entire land. Ravan says that since the people on the border, it's much harder to bring them support because they're far from all the rest of the Jews. So therefore, the Gentiles might be tempted to kill them. So therefore, you should violate in the case of a city in the border, even if it's formally not for only for monetary issues, the attack. This way or that way, it seems that we're still in the ball game of pikuach nefesh. Only the Gemara here explains us the details of pikuach nefesh, that for a regular city, pikuach nefesh is only when the attack is clearly, only when the attack is not for monetary issues. If the attack is not for monetary issues, and even if I have a doubt whether it's for monetary issues or for taking lives, then I should violate. But if it's clearly only for monetary issues, then there's no pikuach nefesh here. However, if it's a city on the border, then it's always considered pikuach nefesh. Fine. Now, let's see the next sources. The Rambam here says another source, even an individual that Gentiles are running after him, or that he's running away because of a snake or a grizzly bear that is chasing him to kill him, there is a commandment, positive commandment during Shabbos to save him, even when you have to do some malachos in Shabbos, even fixing your weapons, it's mutter. By the way, from this source, Rav Goren learned that in some cases when there is no choice, you could even perhaps factories that it's needed that they will create some weapons can work on Shabbos, because it says here that when you see someone that is running away from Gentiles, Rambam stresses that you can make several malachos, and even if it's needed in order to save him to fix some weapons, you're allowed to do so. Now let's see perhaps the main fundamental source, the game changer source regarding our topic. There is a verse in Chumash Devarim. Let's read it. Uvanita matzor al ha'ir. Yeah, ki tatzu al ir. It says, when you'll make a siege, says the verse in Parshat Shoftim, when you'll do a siege over a city, so you should build the siege on that city that is doing a war with you. Adaridata. You should make the siege till it falls down, till victory. Adaridata. That's the term. Yeah, you should not hesitate. And when you have a war against a city, you make the siege, and you're doing it till when? Till it's done. Adrid Tal, I read it. Now, let's look at a Baraita, a Tanaic source in Shabbos Yutet. Tanu Rabbanan. Ein Tsarin, one should not make a siege al ayarot shel nochem, or siege actually is too specific. You should not start a war, including siege, on cities of Gentiles less than 3 days before Shabbat. Okay, the Gemara tells you start the war, the Baraita, tell you, start the war only on Tuesday. Don't start it, maybe on Wednesday you're still allowed. Never start the war on Thursday. And don't start the war on Friday. Meaning, if you have the initiative when to start the war, then you should pick the days that are Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. You should not start the war too close to Shabbos, says the Baraita. But if you started, it seems here that if you violated that ruling and you started the war on Thursday, even though you were not allowed to do so, ein mafsikin, then you don't have to stop on Shabbos. V'chen haya Shammai omer, and so did Shammai Hazaken, the Tana said, ad ridta afilu b'Shabbat. Look at them. Shammai has a special Gzeras HaKatuv. Shammai says, look at this carefully. The verse said, you should build a siege on the city till it falls down, till victory. So Shammai learns that this emphasis of the verse, ad ridta, that the siege should last till victory, he learns from it that even if I started the war on Thursday, which is not okay, I'm not allowed to do so, but once I started it, I don't finish it till it's over, and that is including Shabbos. Okay, what are your questions regarding the learning that we just said? Yeah, I'm repeating quickly. Shammai Hazaken says the verse ad ridta, that you should absolutely continue the war till the enemy is defeated, comes to teach me that even if I started the war in a way that is not halachically approved, because I started it on Thursday, but now once I started, I won't stop, because it should be till the enemy is finished. So what is the problem with this learning? Or what is the question? Maybe now I'll have more cameras open.
It seems to depend on what the United Nations is going to do.
That is true, but now I'm speaking about the source. Shammai Hazaken was not aware of the United Nations, I assume.
So what was he aware of? It was common sense that when you start something, you got to finish it.
So if it's common sense that I don't need a verse, or I'll strengthen the question. Probably if I'm in the middle of the war, I started it on Thursday, okay? And actually the halacha was not happy about it that I started it on Thursday, okay? But I did start it on Thursday anyhow. Now there's a war going on. If I'll stop it on Shabbos, then there'll be pikuach nefesh, right?
Yeah.
So I don't need the verse ad ridta. I don't need a special Gzeras HaKatuv of ad ridta. I just simply know that I don't need to stop it in the middle because of pikuach nefesh. So that's a strong question of this Shammai Hazaken. Why does he give there is an innovation from the pasuk. Ad ridta, you should do it till the end. Like a special verse regarding wars. Who needs that special verse regarding wars? I could apply the general law of pikuach nefesh and says, okay, I wasn't okay that I started it on Thursday, but now we're in a situation of pikuach nefesh. So clearly, I should continue the war and not stop it. So that's a clear question on Shammai Hazaken.
I was thinking, before Shammai, I was thinking that one could theoretically distinguish between an offensive maneuver and a defensive maneuver. If attacked, you respond. But if you're not attacked yet, then don't start if it involves those.
Larry, but we're talking about a case that they started the attack on Thursday, and now they're just telling you don't stop it. Okay? Now, though the distinction itself could be said, of course, I want to add another thing to the table. This prohibition to do it 3 days, to start it, not to start it on Thursday, is it a Doraita prohibition or merely a rabbinic? The simple understanding is that it's merely a rabbinic prohibition, either because it's like you are creating a Chilul Shabbos when you perhaps can avoid it. That's the Baal HaMaor, by starting the war earlier. That's completing it before Shabbat. So one is, but it would seem only a rabbinic prohibition, or that's Baal HaMaor, or the Rambam and the Rif that says that by making the war adjacent to Shabbos, then you will have less oneg Shabbos during Shabbos. But all of these things are merely rabbinic. So if we understand it this way, then the verse Adrita that is L'chora referring to it, saying that if you started, you should complete, is merely an asmachta, because it can't be that the pasuk was referring to a rabbinic, limiting a rabbinic prohibition. At any rate, look at a slightly different version of the drasha by Shammai HaZaken. What war are we talking about that limits? What war are we talking about that limits our ability, that the sages are recommending us, asking us to start the war no later than Wednesday? Are we talking about all wars or merely Milchemet Reshut? So as we'll see, there are sources that are, the Yerushalmi is clearly saying that all of this is applicable regarding a Milchemet Reshut, what is called an optional war. But a Milchemet Mitzvah, which is, like was said here, a defense Milchemet, meaning a war that is done because Gentiles are about to attack us. It could be a preventive action, but it's war that is done because the Gentiles are about to attack us. Or war that is in order to conquer Amalek. All the examples for Milchemet Mitzvah, here you started even on Shabbos. Where, and there's no rabbinic prohibition. From where do we know that? Guess what? Here, the Yerushalmi. You don't make a siege over a city of Gentiles 3 days before Shabbos. This is said only regarding optional war, but an obligatory war, even on Shabbos, because that's what we saw, that Jericho was conquered on Shabbos. And it's written, Ad Ridta, Afilu B'Shabbat. You see, the same source that was brought by Shammai HaZaken, that in an optional war that I started on Thursday, even though I didn't act according to halacha, but once I started, I don't finish it on Shabbos. I finish it on Shabbos, I don't stop. Why? Because it says Ad Ridta, till the end of the war, with no interruptions. The same source is used here by the Yerushalmi to say that a Milchemet Mitzvah is even initiated and started on Shabbos. Okay? And Milchemet Mitzvah could start on Shabbos. Why? Ad Ridta. The verse says that the war should be done absolutely regarding Milchemet Mitzvah. So now we're returning back to the question that was asked here by Phil, and I elaborated it. Why do I need a special verse of Ad Ridta? Perhaps the source for Pikuach Nefesh, the source that says that Safek Pikuach Nefesh is pushing away Shabbos, this source should be enough. So here, look at what the Rishonim and the Achronim have to say about this. And this is a fundamental thing regarding Hilchos Medina, the laws of a state. The Rivash, a medieval Rishon, says the following. If one started it on Thursday, even though it wasn't proper, you don't stop. And you violate Shabbos for all the needs of the siege. And now look at the important words. I should make them on bold. Ve'afilu shelo mipnei hasakana. And even if there is no danger involved, look at that again. Even if there is no danger involved, kmo sheba Kabbalah, as our tradition says, adrid tav afilu b'Shabbat. Look at that. The Rivash, one of the medieval Rishonim, clearly and loudly says, look, the heter for war on Shabbos, the heter for making a war on Shabbos by Jews is not based on sakana. Because even if there is no sakana involved, it says, the verse says, adridta, meaning the national considerations are not only quantitatively different, are qualitatively different than the individual considerations. There is, let's say, I'll give you an example. What is considered a doubt, a suffix pikuach nefesh on the private level, and what is on the national level? It's two different calculations. I'll return to this later. I'll illustrate it. But the point here for now is that the Rivash clearly says that the basis, the halachic basis for Jews making a war on Shabbos is not based merely on the laws, the regular laws of Pikuach Nefesh that are also applicable to the case of Michael Silman giving treatment to an individual Jew somewhere. It's a different category. There is a special Gzeras HaKatuv in Dvarim of Adrita that says that the Jewish nation, for its existence, maybe even for its prosperity, it could have a war on Shabbos. Of course, there are limitations to this law too, but it's a different halachic category than the general category of Pikuach Nefesh. Let's further clarify it and elaborate on it. Look at what the Sfat Emet says. The Sfat Emet is an Achron, and he is clarifying the Rivash that is pretty clear on its own. It's clear that this case, he makes the commentary on the source on Gemara Shabbos Yutet, that Adrid Ta teaches me that even if I started a war on Thursday, which is not appropriate, but I won't stop it on Shabbos. And the Sfat Emet clarifies, just like the Rivash, it's clear that it talks even when there is no danger. Im ken lama likra, because then if it talks about a pikuach nefesh, I don't need a special verse. I have already a verse, v'chai bahem, that when there is pikuach nefesh, I violate Shabbos. So clearly it says you continue the war, even if making stop in the war for Shabbos wouldn't harm you in terms of pikuach nefesh. It would harm you for the purposes of the war, not in terms of pikuach nefesh. But even in such a case, you continue. Why? Look at what the Sfat Emet says. Al korchach tzarich lomar, the ma'iri hecha sheyadenu takifa. That the case is talking about when we are in sovereignty, like our case, and we have power. It talks about a case when the Jews have power and they can wage war. But by making a stop, then the goals of the war of conquering the land will be damaged. No life danger is at stake, but the national goals, they will be damaged by not continuing the war on Shabbos. And comes the verse to say that the conquering of the land of Israel is indeed, and needless to say, maintaining the conquering is pushing away Shabbos. So here the Sfat Emet says clearly what the Rivash said, that the basis for the heter for war on Shabbos is whenever there is a national interest to do the war on Shabbos, even if it's not pikuach nefesh, then we have a heter to do the war on Shabbos. On the same token, the Rogachover, the Tzofnat Paneach, says here, Zelomin gather pikuach nefesh. This is not part of the category pikuach nefesh. Rak mishum kibush. It is a different category, just like the Sfadamet. It's the kibush haaretz, conquering the land. And milchemet chova mutar, even to start on Shabbos, as it's written in the Yerushalmi. Why are you allowed to start even a war on Shabbos if it's a milchemet mitzvah? There's no pikuach nefesh here, necessarily, because there is a special heter for, on the national level, for starting and doing and continuing a war on Shabbos, even when no clear pikuach nefesh is involved, because of the verse Ad Rigta. My Rebbe Rav Amital in his book wrote a whole chapter about this, and Rav Goren, of course, dealt a lot with this Rivash, Sfat Emet, Sfat Paneach, Tzofnat Paneach, and look at his clear words. The heter to do a war on Shabbos is not based on the heter of pikuach nefesh, as people are used to think. Rather, it's based on a special heter that is specific regarding war, and that is relying on the drasha of Shammai Azakin in the Yerushalmi, Ad Rita, even on Shabbos. Because the heter of pikuach nefesh, we learn from the Chai Bahem, and if we always have in a war, in combat, an issue of pikuach nefesh, then we don't need a special drasha. Rather, clearly, Shammai Azaken comes to teach us an additional heter, a specific heter, that the war itself is pushing away Shabbos as a mitzvah in itself. A mitzvah in itself, a national mitzvah for the benefit of, for the national interests. Rav Chaim Navon, a young rabbi in Modi'in, alumni of the Gush Yeshiva, a famous writer, Rav Chaim Navon elaborates and comments on the words of Rav Goren. From here we see that according to Rav Goren, the halacha is different than what seems from the historical sources. Halachically, one is allowed to run a war on Shabbos even in Milchemet Reshut. Kal v'chomer that you could initiate even attacks on Shabbos when it's Milchemet Mitzvah, and not only passively protect yourself. As some additional poskim commented, if we will rely on this source, we were able to do even actions that are not direct combat actions, like if the soldiers are in a cold place, can I make them tea on Shabbos or coffee? Well, perhaps they'll survive even without it. But still, maybe it's included in the special heter that I'm running a war in a regular way, even if there's Chil Shabbos considered, and even if that Chil Shabbos is not really necessarily life-saving. Or another very sensitive issue: am I allowed to take bodies on Shabbos, to take them away? Now, you could say, no, of course you're allowed to take the bodies of your soldiers, even though they're dead already, because if the Hamas will take them, then it will create a pikuach nefesh, because they will do all kinds of things with them. But forget about this. Let's say it's clear that there is no pikuach nefesh involved. Still, under some circumstances, you'll be allowed to take them because it's part of the heter of doing a war in a regular way on Shabbos, even when there is no pikuach nefesh involved. But here, look at the important last paragraph of Rav Navon. But aside from the nafkamina, like can I make coffee under some circumstances to soldiers, even if they will survive without it, or all kinds of other things, he says we should look at the principle of the innovation of Rav Goren, and that's very important. Rav Goren really established that the law of pikuach nefesh of an individual is not compatible, is not the one that is fitting to the situation of a national war. In such a war, you can't make only the considerations of direct pikuach nefesh. Rather, you should make a general preparation and preparations, deterrence. There are all kinds of much wider considerations that are not necessarily falling in the calculations of direct pikuach nefesh. Even if you say that their considerations should be pikuach nefesh, but they should think about long-term considerations, which is the benefit and the good of the nations, like national morale, economy. So the considerations are all regarding wars are all different, like long-term deterrence, national morality. All of these things are considerations regarding the heter to do a war that is not under the umbrella on Shabbos, that are not under the umbrella of pikuach nefesh. I want to read. Okay, we don't have much more time, but I do want to finish here to further even explicate the difference between. Okay, let's see the Rambam here in Hilchos Melachim. When soldiers are coming at the border of the Gentile land, and they will conquer it, and they now need to eat, they are allowed to eat non-kosher food if they're hungry. If they found only non-kosher food, they can eat it. Now, Radvaz is saying the following. Look, Radvaz is a very important commentator on the Rambam, and he says, I want to further explain Maimonides here, because Maimonides here, if you say that he talks about pikuach nefesh here, that they're allowed to eat non-kosher food if they're going to starve to death, then I don't need that. That's clear. Why does he need to teach me that in a separate halacha? Rather, Radvaz says, look, I think that it talks not about a case that they are going to starve, but it's a further innovation that they don't need to too much make tircha. Now they're in the city of the Gentiles, so of course the non-kosher food is available, and it will be very, very hard to find kosher food. And if they will go and spend their time in looking for that kosher food, then they will be attacked perhaps by the nations. Okay, so the Radvaz, what does he say here is, look, the heter of Maimonides to eat non-kosher food when Jews conquered a Gentile city is not because they're going to starve now if they won't eat it. That's simple. But there is a further stretch, still under the umbrella of pikuach nefesh. Look at that. Not a special heter for war, the Radvaz says. The Rambam here talks about pikuach nefesh. Only it says if we talk about wars, then the cheshbonos of pikuach nefesh are even, the suffix pikuach nefesh is even a lower threshold, meaning just the concern that they will now spend extra time in looking for kosher food, and that might cause potentially the Gentiles to be in a better position to attack them. For that only, I allow them to eat non-kosher food. Meaning the Radvaz is still staying under the paradigm of pikuach nefesh. Only it says that when we're talking about wars, the threshold of what is the suffix pikuach nefesh is getting lower. I'll give you an example. Rab Shlomo Zalman Auerbach gave a heter. Rab Shlomo Zalman Auerbach gave a heter for an intelligent soldier. I spoke about this once in these shiurim, in Torah Mitzion shiurim, on Thursday shiurim, that even though he knows that he needed to translate some codes from an enemy, he was listening, and he knew how to categorize what messages most likely have nothing to do with national security. And he wanted Heather not to be busy during Shabbos in translating them. And Rav Auerbach told him, you're obligated to translate anything, even though it involves Chilul Shabbos. Even though such a probability regarding an individual would not be considered suffix pikuach nefesh. But the thing is the following. If an individual life is being lost, it's a terrible tragedy, no doubt. But if the whole nation is destroyed, that's a far, far more terrible tragedy. So the probability that is defined as pikuach nefesh, safek pikuach nefesh on the individual level is not the same regarding when the risk is for the nation as a whole. But that is still in the discourse of pikuach nefesh. It's only defining safek pikuach nefesh here and there is not the same. One could have argued that that is what the verse Adrita is telling me, that your considerations for what is a safek pikuach nefesh are different, though a counter argument would be that I don't need a verse for that. I just apply the probabilities of what is safek pikuach nefesh and the expected value regarding in each context. The alternative is to say that as we advanced according to Rav Goren and the Sfat Emet and that no, we're bechlal not in the ball game of pikuach nefesh. There's a special din that when there's a war, there are national considerations like national morale, etc., and we're bechlal not under the framework of pikuach nefesh and a milchemet mitzvah. You are allowed to wage it even on Shabbos, not because of pikuach nefesh. So these are the two alternative views. Whether what I say that we're still under the umbrella of pikuach nefesh, but the probabilities are different. The safek pikuach nefesh is already starting even in a lower threshold, or I'm saying no, it's just a different category. And Reb Asher Weiss says, V'nirabi Urdvarav, he says, Radvaz says that in the war, you have an innovative halacha that even a far-fetched chashash pikuach nefesh, one is allowed to violate Shabbos for it. However, he says in the Shut HaRivash, we see that the heter to violate Shabbos is not because of danger at all, but it's just the halacha l'Moshe Misinai that we are violating Shabbos to any need of the siege. So Rav Asher Weiss makes clearly the difference here between the Radvaz that is still in the ballgame of pikuach nefesh, and on the contrary, the Rivash that says, like Rav Goren, that says that it's a total different ballgame. We'll conclude with Rav Melamed's statement here. Today, all the country is halachically defined as a border country, meaning Tel Aviv, as opposed to the Gemara time, that made a distinction between a city on the border and a city inside the land. Today, when you have missiles, Tel Aviv is also considered a city on the border, halachically. So claims Rav Melamed. So that's one. And therefore, in all the areas of the country, it's a mitzvah to violate Shabbos in order to protect life and property. Shabbos violators that went on a tour, yeah, that happens to Israeli soldiers. Let's say I'm a religious soldier, and here I have chilonim that are coming to have fun in Hamat Gader during Shabbat. So of course they have if there's no way to prevent them from doing this tour, then I'm obligated to protect them, even though they're Shabbos violators. I'm also allowed to take death bodies on Shabbos so that they won't fall in the hands of the enemy. Since this might damage the national morale, then we should take it. And that is even falling under the umbrella of Pikuach Nefesh, as I said, because they might, at the end, we might have to release terrorists because of that. Okay, so this is what we see here. So in some, I see it's already 11:47. In some, we have explored here the topic of the Jewish state making wars on Shabbat. We have seen here two directions. Either it's like the Radvaz, meaning it's based on Pikuach Nefesh. Only we know that the probability the threshold to define the Safek Pikuach Nefesh is much, much lower. And even very tiny things are already considered Safek Pikuach Nefesh when I'm talking on the national level, because regarding a nation, I can't take even a very, very little risk. For example, on the personal level, I'll take a risk of taking my car and driving from Yerushalayim to Tel Aviv. All of us are doing this. But the same probability of risk, if a prime minister will take it regarding the country, it will be considered not responsible. Okay, so it's very, very simple, the distinction here. And that is one direction. And the second direction, based on the Rivash, Sfat Emet, Tzofnat Paneach, Rav Goren, Rav Amital, is that there is, and Rav Asher Weiss brought that too as an option, is that there is a distinct special heter for a Jewish nation to do wars on Shabbat out of national consideration, and you don't have always to be busy to see whether it has a very, very far implication towards Pikuach Nefesh. You're free from that. The minute that there is a valid national consideration here, then you're doing the wars and you're doing that in normal ways, and you don't have to also be picking every action to check whether it is related to Pikuach Nefesh or not. Okay. Let's hope for more quiet days, and שיהיה לכולם שבת שלום ושבת בריאה ושקטה.
Amen. Yes, God. Thank you.
אוקיי, שבת שלום, בשורות טובות.